Dawn always found Sarah and her father, Francis, walking the narrow path behind their bungalow, dew clinging to her slippers while his hand warmed hers. He spoke softly about small things, the smell of rain, the honesty of soil, the way sparrows argued then forgave, and she listened, storing every word like coins in a jar. Evenings were gentler still. A chipped enamel pot singing on the stove, 2 spoons tapping plates, and Francis saying, "Dignity is your greatest dress, my child. Never trade it." She watched him fold laundry with reverence, even the frayed shirts as if cloth remembered kindness. Sometimes he'd pause, looking toward the empty chair at the table, and whisper, "We keep going," before turning his smile back on her. Their world was humble, old curtains, patched bedding, shoes with careful stitches, but it felt full because he noticed everything that mattered. When she faltered at sums, he'd draw numbers in palm dust and say, "We'll try again slowly." On Sundays, they watered the hibiscus by the window and laughed whenever a droplet kissed noses. Love was their ritual, faithful as a lamp low, steady in wind. In that softness, Sarah believed tenderness was respected and dignity, worn, could never be torn. On market Saturdays, Francis bartered yams with jokes, collecting small discounts the way rain fills a gourd. 2 tubers and a smile, he'd tease, and Sarah's laughter sealed the bargain. People trusted him. He never shorted anyone a measure or kept the better bunch for himself. When storms rose and gutters frothed, he stood by the window counting between thunder and lightning, teaching patience. We wait, then move. At night he told stories of Sarah's mother, how she braided hope into mornings, how she stitched sleeves tighter so hugs landed firm. Sometimes his voice slipped, and Sarah would squeeze his fingers. "We keep going," she whispered back, borrowing his courage. Their rituals steadied them, sweeping the yard, rinsing plates with careful hands, finishing homework by lantern glow. If a neighbor quarreled, Francis would nod toward the hibiscus and say, "Flowers argue with wind, yet return." When she stumbled over a reading, he'd trace letters slowly on paper, patient as dawn. In those hours, Sarah believed the world could be held together by gentleness and the right words spoken at the right time. And that home, though modest, could shelter hearts from weather no forecast could truly see. They slept without fear. The house learned the shape of absence long before Sarah fully understood it. Her mother's scarf still hung behind the door, catching evening light like a quiet promise, yet the chair opposite Francis sat untouched at meals, delicate vacancy. On some mornings, Sarah would pour an extra cup of tea, forget, then blush, lifting it to water the hibiscus instead. Francis kept the stories gentle, never heavy enough to crush a child's chest, but grief traveled the corridors like dusk, soft and persistent. He mended what he could, loose hinges, wobbly stools, bent nails, and left untouched what he couldn't mend. The echo of a voice, the way lullabies filtered through rain. When Sarah outgrew her shoes, he stitched leather at the edges, laughing that footprints need patience to widen. Yet around her 12th year, loneliness deepened. Teachers asked for a mother's signature at school. Parents stood in clusters at visiting day. Sarah waved from a distance, pretending busyness. One night after washing plates, Francis said, "A home needs many hands, perhaps. Another heart might help us." He waited as if asking permission from the quiet chair, and Sarah, unsure, nodded. Love, she believed, could truly make space without replacing memory. Weeks passed while Francis spoke with elders and listened more than he argued. He returned one Sunday with measured steps and said, "Her name is Gladys. She lost her husband years ago. 2 daughters, Gloria and Melissa. They are kind." He spoke the word carefully, like a glass ornament he didn't want to drop. Sarah nodded, tugging at a thread on her skirt, unsure where her mother's stories would sit beside new footsteps. That evening she dusted the sitting room, moved the scarf to the wardrobe, and whispered, "Please, help me welcome them." Francis reheated stew and tasted it twice, worried about salt. "We will remain ourselves," he promised, smoothing her hair. "No one will replace your mother." Sarah wanted to believe the sentence could hold against weather. She repeated it while folding napkins, while laying 2 extra spoons, while pressing wrinkles from the tablecloth with her palm. Outside, neighborhood children chased a ball and shouted, their joy hopping over puddles. Inside, the house waited. Between hope and memory, Sarah took a breath and chose courtesy. If kindness was a door, she would hold it open and let what was meant to arrive step in gently. Carefully, without stepping on yesterday. Gladys arrived on a Thursday afternoon, perfume arriving before her words, heels announcing each step like a verdict. Gloria and Melissa followed, carrying polished suitcases and appraising the house with the startled frowns of visitors expecting more. Francis welcomed them with plates of jollof and a careful smile. "You are safe here," he said. Gladys thanked him, her voice sweet, eyes sweeping past Sarah as though searching for a misplaced ornament. "You must be Sarah," she said finally, not unkindly, only lightly distant. Gloria whispered something to Melissa, and both giggled behind their hands. Sarah lowered her gaze and offered water. She had prepared the spare room with fresh sheets, tucked corners tight, and arranged a small vase of hibiscus by the window. When Gladys saw it, she nodded politely, then tilted the vase so the blooms faced inward. "Too much sun wilts pride," she murmured. Francis laughed as if it were a proverb he hadn't learned yet. Through dinner, conversation felt like a narrow bridge. Everyone crossed slowly, testing planks, and Sarah tried to match the rhythm, balancing welcome with the quiet ache of making room for strangers in a map already drawn, without erasing her mother's gentle handwriting. In the first week, Gladys praised order and economy, setting new rules with a light smile that did not invite questions. Plates were stacked by size, cups by rim thickness, curtains drawn to a stricter angle. "Standards make homes respectable," she said. When Sarah offered to wash dishes, Gladys answered, "Good. Every house needs reliable hands," and passed her a larger pile than before. Gloria claimed the chair by the window where Francis usually read, saying the light favored her complexion for selfies. Melissa hung necklaces on the hibiscus vase until stems drooped. Francis, eager for peace, missed the tension's early footsteps. He told jokes at dinner, and Gladys laughed, but her eyes seldom rested on Sarah. One evening, Gloria studied Sarah's dress and whispered, "Vintage," stretching the word until it tore. Melissa added, "Charming," and let the syllables fall like crumbs. Sarah folded napkins carefully, deciding that dignity could be ironed daily. After lights out, she lay awake listening to different breathing in the house, practicing kindness in her mind the way others practice scales, determined not to let suspicion train her heart into hardness. She promised herself to watch, to learn, to protect what her father cherished most. Cracks rarely shout, they whisper. Sarah noticed them in how chores were assigned. Gloria folded 2 towels, declared herself tired, then drifted to her phone while Sarah finished the rest. Melissa borrowed Sarah's comb without asking, leaving a few teeth bent, and laughed. "It's only plastic." Gladys praised her daughter's small efforts, offering applause for barely made beds, then inspected Sarah's corners with an extra finger, finding dust that sunlight couldn't see. "You must learn thoroughness," she said, as if the word meant obedience. Francis returned late from work, carrying the fatigue of a man trying to hold many strings. He saw compliance, not the unequal knots. At dinner he would say, "We're one family," and Gladys would nod. Yet when fruit was sliced, the sweetest pieces drifted toward Gloria and Melissa. Sarah took what remained, chewing slowly, tasting the arithmetic of unfairness. She told herself kindness could persuade hardness to soften, that gentleness was not a surrender, but a strategy with breathing. She wrote her school notes, kept her shoes by doors, and guarded her smile from becoming brittle. When loneliness pressed, she traced hibiscus veins and repeated Francis's lesson. We wait, then move, trusting patience to build a bridge. One evening, when rain scribbled on the roof, Francis proposed a family game to lighten the air. Everyone tells one good thing about today, he smiled. Gloria announced, I tried a new filter. My followers adored it. Melissa added, I learned to dance. Gladys praised them warmly. When it was Sarah's turn, she said, I understood my mathematics problem after practicing. Gloria yawned theatrically. Everyone understands eventually, she said. Francis cleared his throat. Effort deserves respect. Gladys touched his arm. They're only teasing. Later, Gloria asked to borrow Sarah's notebook, returned it smudged, and called the ink shy. Melissa tried on Sarah's only good sandals, stretched them, then shrugged. You'll manage. In bed, Sarah whispered into darkness, We keep going. sending the words to whatever gentleness might be listening. She wrote a small promise on scrap paper and hid it under the lampshade. I will not harden. The sentence glowed faintly whenever the bulb warmed. Weeks moved forward, measured by chores, muted jokes, and careful smiles. The crack widened, but Sarah kept her footing, balancing on courtesy the way tightrope walkers balance on breath, unwilling to let bitterness teach her how to walk. She chose tenderness again and again daily. It happened on a Wednesday bright enough to make clotheslines sparkle. Francis returned from town a little earlier than usual, set down his basket of oranges, and pressed a hand to his chest as if flattening a stubborn crease. "Just tired," he said when Sarah rushed forward, but his smile was misbuttoned. He sat, breathed, then stood too quickly. The room tilted. A plate slipped from Sarah's damp fingers and shattered like a warning. "Papa?" she asked, voice narrowing. He gripped the table, eyes apologizing before words formed, and folded to the floor, breath scattered like papers in wind. Neighbors came, then silence, then a verdict no one wanted. A heart that had carried too much for too long had finally refused kindness. Sarah's world staggered. In the stillness afterward, she tucked his glasses into their case and held them like a fragile door to yesterday. The house felt enormous, every corner rehearsing loss. She stood by the hibiscus, palms trembling, whispering, "We keep going." And for the first time the sentence returned without an echo. Rain began, sliding down window panes like unspooled stitches. Sarah knelt, gathered the orange basket, and told the floor she would not break next. Morning scattered days like fallen leaves. Gladys cried neatly, dabbing corners of her eyes with a handkerchief that never wrinkled, then began rearranging drawers as though grief were a puzzle to solve. "We must be practical," she told Sarah, voice organized. "There are documents to locate." Gloria and Melissa drifted in and out of rooms, avoiding chores with the fog of bereavement. Sarah washed plates in water gone cold, trying to stitch her father's words across the day, but every task felt wider than her hands. On the 7th morning, Gladys cleared the dining table and laid down folders with a ceremonious thud. "Your father left responsibilities," she announced. She separated papers into tidy stacks, deeds, receipts, savings books, sliding them toward herself with the gravity of ownership. Sarah watched, a knot tightening beneath her ribs. "May I keep his glasses?" she asked. Gladys smiled thinly. "Of course. They are of no use to me." The sentence chilled the room. That night, Sarah pressed the glasses case under her pillow like a small lighthouse, then stared at the ceiling, whispering to the dark, "Please help me guard what he cared for." She felt the house listening, but giving no answers back tonight. The next week smelled of ink. Gladys summoned a neighbor who typed quickly and smiled rarely, and together they turned the living room into an office. "These are necessary transfers," Gladys said, tapping documents with a lacquered nail. "As the surviving spouse, I must consolidate." She spoke the language of authority as if born to it. Sarah stood beside the hibiscus, clutching Francis's keys, and tried to read paragraphs that braided jargon with shadows. "Your father would want stability," Gladys added, voice lilting toward kindness without landing. Gloria wandered through, snapping photos of neat folders. Melissa adjusted bracelets and asked whether the deed stamps matched her nail color. Sarah felt young in a way she hadn't felt in years, like vocabulary was a tall fence she couldn't climb. When she hesitated before signing a delivery receipt, Gladys sighed. "We have no time for romance, dear. Real life requires decisions." Sarah swallowed her doubt, fearing rudeness might dishonor Francis's memory. The pen balanced awkwardly in her fingers, the room's air thin as paper. She set the pen down, lifted it again, and finally signed for a parcel, not realizing how ink lets courage look complicit when questions are silenced by grief. By Friday, the table resembled a chessboard with only one player. Gladys slid a final folder forward and said, "This confirms I will oversee accounts, property maintenance, and all outstanding obligations." Her smile never reached her eyes. "You'll continue with school and house duties. It's safest." Sarah thought of Francis's steady voice and tried to steady her own. "May I see the will?" Gladys's lashes lowered. "There was no formal will, only verbal assurances to care for you. I am doing exactly that." The room tightened. Gloria clattered a spoon and laughed too loudly. Melissa asked whether breakfast tomorrow could include pancakes. Sarah's mouth formed the word okay without agreement. She gathered plates, washing them until her hands pruned, then dried them twice, as if thoroughness could stop a river. That night she opened Francis's old toolbox, searching for anything that looked like a map. She found only the faithful weight of his hammer and a pressed leaf between faded receipts. She slipped the leaf into her pocket and told herself it wasn't surrender. It was waiting with eyes open. She would memorize signatures, dates, colors of ink, even smudges, until courage returned to stand in daylight without shaking again inside. The days changed shape. Sarah rose before sunrise to sweep the compound, scrubbed steps until stone lightened, and polished the dining table so thoroughly she could count ceiling boards in its surface. Gladys called it doing one's part, assigning tasks with appointment book precision. Gloria has studies. Melissa must rest her wrists. Creative girls need ease, she said. Sarah nodded, moving from room to room like a quiet broom, while Gloria tried on necklaces that once lived in her mother's jewelry tin. Vintage, Gloria said, admiring herself in the mirror. Melissa lifted a wrapper from the bottom of Sarah's trunk and twirled. We're helping you keep things fresh, she joked, forgetting to return it. When visitors came, Gladys introduced her daughters as accomplished and presented Sarah as our reliable helper, a phrase that looked polite and felt like a label. Sarah learned to place cups without clatter and swallow replies whole. At night, she placed Francis's glasses on the dresser and told them the day, as if lenses could keep record. Sometimes the glass flashed moonlight back, a small nod that grief could still listen. She slept lightly, ready for dawn's demands and the house's delicate moods that never truly rested. One afternoon, as Sarah knelt wiping skirting boards, Gloria leaned in the doorway scrolling her phone. You're good at this, she said, tone floating between compliment and command. Melissa entered wearing the wrapper again. We should take photos, she grinned. Gladys passed, glanced at Sarah's cloth, and said, mind the corners. Sarah pressed the cloth deeper, careful as surgery, and let silence do what arguments couldn't. Alone later, she opened a small tin where she kept thread, a thimble, and the torn ribbon from her mother's dress, the one she never wore now, only handled like prayer. She untied the ribbon, smoothed its creases, and whispered, I am still your daughter. The words steadied her spine. She arranged her schoolbooks on the table, studied by lamplight, and wrote a sentence in the margin of her notes. If dignity is my dress, I must learn the law that guards it. The ink dried slowly, like a seed deciding where to root. Outside, rain tapped evening rhythm. Sarah practiced hers, solve one problem, then face the next. She stacked plates, planned tomorrow's chores. Before sleep, she touched Glass's case and repeated Francis's lesson, we wait, then move, adding, and when we move, wisely. In the bottom of her trunk, beneath folded school uniforms and a sweater Francis mended thrice, lay the dress her mother had sewn, cream cotton with tiny gold stitches along the hem like sunlight caught in thread. Sarah lifted it on evenings when the house felt cold, letting the cloth fall across her knees like a remembered blessing. The bodice still held the faintest scent of shea, and when she pressed her cheek there, she could almost hear lullabies rising through branches of rain. Gladys had never noticed it. Sarah kept it that way, never wearing it when the house was loud with visitors, only touching it when quiet gathered. Mama, she whispered, teach me to be soft without breaking. She traced the seams, studying how patience strengthens corners, how faith works invisibly like a hidden lining. The dress did not sparkle. It glowed the way embers glow, low, sure, enduring. Holding it steadied her breath and slowed her anger into something she could carry without spilling. Sometimes she imagined wearing it to an afternoon, nothing grand, sunlight through the window, tea not too sweet, and a conversation where every sentence landed gently. In that picture, Francis laughed, and the hibiscus held tall. When an embossed invitation arrived for Gloria's 18th birthday, dinner, music, pastel dress code, Sarah folded it twice and slid it beneath her pillow. She had no pastel dress, only this one memory stitched in cream. For 2 nights, she argued with herself in whispers. Stay unseen, fear advised. Stand upright, dignity replied. On the 3rd evening, she set the dress across the bed and checked every seam. She washed it carefully in warm water, pressed it between towels, and waited by the window while it dried, the fabric breathing like a quiet animal. Gladys measured table runners in the dining room. Gloria approved cake layers. Melissa filmed a preview for her friends. No one asked Sarah what she would wear. No one noticed her steady preparation. She braided her hair simply and polished her worn sandals until they reflected a patient shine. Holding the dress to her chest, she told the mirror, "I will enter as my mother's daughter." The mirror did not argue. Somewhere within, a small courage placed its hand on her back and said, "Walk." She folded a napkin for her pocket, not decoration but reminder. Wipe tears, lift chin, breathe, then keep walking through whatever doors open. Music braided with perfume and laughter until the air itself felt dressed. Lights threaded the ceiling, casting soft halos on guests in pastel silk. Sarah stood at the doorway, the cream dress smoothing down her sides like courage settling into place. She waited for the music to turn, then slipped quietly to the back, choosing a corner near the hibiscus where she could watch without blocking anyone's joy. Gloria spun under the chandelier while phones filmed. Melissa curated laughter like a playlist. Gladys floated between tables, complimenting bracelets and confirming place settings as if royalty might arrive. Someone bumped Sarah's shoulder and said, "Servers to the left," without looking. She answered, "I live here," softly enough to keep peace. A young cousin asked for water. Sarah fetched it and returned to her corner. For a brief minute, the room's glow folded over her too, and she believed she could belong by standing very still. Then Gloria's gaze snagged on Cream, and the first thread of mockery began to pull. She felt it before words, an old temperature dropping, the careful chill that comes before storms. She steadied her breath and refused to flinch, hands loose at her sides, eyes gentle, waiting. Gloria approached with Melissa orbiting like a smaller moon. "What are you wearing?" Gloria smiled, the question shaped like kindness and sharpened like a blade. "My mother's dress," Sarah said, steadier than she felt. Melissa ran fingers along the hem. "Cream at a pastel party," she whispered to cameras. Gladys arrived, took in the scene, and offered nothing that could be mistaken for rescue. "You should be helping," she told Sarah, mild as tea. "I will after greeting you," Sarah answered. Silence gathered. Then, without warning, Gloria pinched fabric at the waist. "Let's improve the fit," she laughed. Hands joined hands. A seam protested, then yielded with a sound that hollowed the room. Someone giggled. Someone clapped. The second seam split, exposing the lining like a wound. Sarah froze, dignity lifting both hands to hold what society insisted on tearing. "Please," she said, voice thinned. Gladys looked away. Laughter swelled. Music continued. Sarah stepped backward, gathered the torn halves across her chest, and walked, not running, from the hall, choosing the road that still knew her name. Outside, air met her like water. She kept walking past the gate, across street, toward the path behind bungalow where memory could breathe. She reached the narrow path where hibiscus leaned like listening elders and sank to the ground. The dress gathered in her lap like a failed promise. The soil was cool through her skirt, and the moon arrived without announcement, rehearsing its old duty of holding light when no one else would. "We keep going," she whispered, but the words rattled like cutlery in an empty drawer. She pressed her forehead to her knees, smelling soap and dust and embarrassment, and let tears fall where no camera could find them. Memory replayed the seams splitting, the small pop, the brief gasp, the chorus of laughter she would hear for years if she let it lodge behind her ribs. She breathed in fives, then sevens, then tried again in threes. Somewhere across the street, music still performed brightness. Here, only crickets rehearsed survival. Sarah lifted her face, wiped it with the napkin she had packed, and said aloud, "I am not less. I am not less." She stayed until the air cooled her anger into ache, until the ground steadied spinning thoughts, until her hands stopped shaking enough to fold the torn cloth carefully. Then she listened for instructions inside silence patiently. Time loosened its belt and moved slower. Sarah rose, gathered the dress tighter, and walked to the roadside where dust held the day's footprints like a ledger. A stray dog drifted past, uninterested in human sorrow. She leaned against the old wooden sign near the bend and watched moths throw themselves at the lamp as if they believed light could be entered. "I will not disappear," she told the night. Cars occasionally sighed by, carrying other people's music, other people's laughter. None of them stopped. She thought of Francis's voice. "We wait, then move," and decided waiting could be a kind of movement if done with intention. So she stood, shoulders squared, learning the shape of endurance under a sky wide enough for the insult and the hope to breathe together. When finally a pair of headlights slowed and turned toward her, she did not flinch. She did not step backward. She only lifted her chin, ready to answer her name without apology. The night smelled of stone and sap. The gate creaked, a child laughed. Sarah counted her breaths, matched them to cicadas, and felt trembling leave her wrists. "I am my father's daughter," she said, then added softer, "and my mother's." The car slowed as if guided by unseen hands, headlights sweeping over Sarah's small figure hunched by the wooden signpost. Judge Michael stepped out, his frame bent with years yet eyes sharp as memory. He froze when her tear-streaked face lifted, the broken dress clutched against her chest. "Sarah!" he whispered, disbelief mingling with sorrow. She blinked through tears, struggling to place the man. He stepped closer, voice trembling. "I am Michael, your father's brother in spirit, his dearest friend. What has happened to you?" At the sound of Francis's name, Sarah broke into sobs she had held back. He crouched, wrapping his coat around her shoulders, shielding her from the night air. "You are not alone, child," he said, steady as a vow. "Tell me everything." Words spilled between sobs, cruelty, servitude, and the shaming. He listened, his jaw tightening with every detail, until silence returned. "Come with me," he urged, guiding her gently toward the car. "This place does not deserve your tears. I promised your father I would always protect his only child, and I have failed too long." Sarah hesitated, clutching the torn fabric. "If I leave, what remains of my parents here?" she whispered. Michael laid a hand on hers. "What remains is in you, their courage, their truth. Let me carry you to safety." She swallowed hard, then nodded, stepping into the car. As the engine hummed, she leaned against the seat, exhaustion heavier than grief. "We keep going," Michael murmured, echoing Francis without knowing. Sarah closed her eyes, the words like a rope pulling her from the abyss. For the first time since her father's death, she felt night could end with dawn. Judge Michael's home smelled of wood polish and old books, shelves lined with legal volumes that seemed to breathe authority. Sarah's eyes darted around nervously, unsure if she belonged in such order. Michael gestured her to sit, then poured warm water. "Drink, child. Tomorrow begins differently." She hesitated, then whispered, "Why did you stop for me?" He sank into his chair, eyes misting. "Because I saw Francis in your face. Years ago, he told me, if anything ever happens, stand for Sarah. I was far away when he died. I failed him." Sarah shook her head. "You didn't know." He leaned forward, voice breaking. "But now that I do, I swear I will not fail you again. From this night, I am father and teacher. You will rise, not as servant, but as rightful daughter of dignity." Sarah gripped the cup, warmth seeping into her palms, unsure whether to believe hope so soon after despair. "But I have nothing," she whispered. "Even my mother's dress is gone." Michael's gaze hardened, not unkindly. "Child, you have something greater, your father's blood, your mother's spirit. Together, they shaped a lawyer's daughter. I will enroll you in school again. You will learn, fight, and stand taller than the house that cast you out." His words burned into her heart, stitching seams where they had been ripped. "Do you believe me?" he asked. Sarah breathed deeply, then nodded. "I will try." Michael's lips curved into a tired smile. "No, you will do more than try, you will overcome. It is the only way to honor Francis." That night, Sarah lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, repeating the vow silently, "I will rise." Morning sunlight filtered through curtains, falling across Sarah's face like permission. She sat up, startled by the soft mattress, the quiet hum of safety. Michael's housekeeper, a kind elderly woman named Martha, tapped the door lightly. "Breakfast, my dear. Judge said you must eat well." Sarah descended the stairs shyly, dressed in clothes Martha had folded for her, simple but clean. At the table, Michael spread papers. "I've already begun registration. You will continue your schooling." Sarah swallowed, her throat thick. "But what if I'm not strong enough?" He placed his glasses on the table. Strength is built, not born. Today you begin building. He added gently, and remember, in this house you are not a servant. You are Sarah, my daughter in every way but blood. The day unfolded with unfamiliar kindness. Martha showed Sarah her room properly, pointing at the desk. Here, you will write dreams. Sarah touched the wood as if it could bruise. In the evening, Michael sat with her in the study, opening thick law books. These, he said, are weapons sharper than knives. One day, you'll wield them. Sarah leaned close, tracing words she barely understood. Will I really? She whispered. Michael smiled. If Francis's child cannot, then no one can. Sarah felt tears rise, not of sorrow, but of possibility. Alone later, she unpacked the torn dress, folded it reverently, and slid it under the mattress. I'll keep you safe, she murmured, until I'm strong enough to honor you. For the first time, grief and hope shared a room without fighting. School began with awkward stares. Whispers trailed Sarah as she entered, her second-hand shoes squeaking on polished floors. Isn't that the girl who vanished? One student whispered. She looks different. Sarah lifted her chin, echoing Michael's words. Strength is built. She listened with unbroken attention, taking notes fiercely, as though each sentence was a lifeline. At night, she studied late into dim light, eyes burning, heart whispering. Never again will I be small. One evening Michael entered the study, saw her bent over books, and said, You remind me of Francis. They too read until dawn. She looked up, exhausted but smiling. Then I will keep reading, until I can make him proud. He touched her shoulder, not proud, astonished. Every exam became a battlefield. While others celebrated with chatter, Sarah sat beneath trees reviewing mistakes. Why don't you rest? A classmate asked. She answered simply, Because I can't afford to fail. In debate club, when challenged to speak, she hesitated only a moment before standing. Her voice was low but carried weight. Justice is not charity, it is a debt, she declared. The room hushed. Afterwards, one teacher said softly, That girl speaks with conviction far beyond her years. Sarah walked home silently, repeating the word conviction until it felt stitched into her skin. That night, folding her books, she whispered to the torn dress beneath the mattress, One day, my knowledge will be the thread that repairs us. Months turned into years, and Sarah's voice became her signature. In debates, when she rose, silence followed. A society that silences truth, she argued once, writes its own shame. Her opponents faltered, unable to match the clarity that came not from arrogance, but from wounds. Teachers began assigning her more speeches. Michael attended once, sitting in the back, pride brimming behind his spectacles. Afterward, he said, You speak like your father would have wished. Sarah answered softly, No, I speak because of what they took from me. If they had left me in silence, perhaps I'd still be sweeping floors. Michael shook his head. No, child, you were always meant to stand. Peers began to respect her. Some sought her help in studies. A few whispered admiration, though Sarah remained guarded. Gloria's laughter, Melissa's cruelty, they lingered like ghosts, reminding her that kindness could mask betrayal. Yet her reserve only deepened her aura. One evening, a classmate asked, How do you speak so boldly? Sarah paused, then replied, Because I once lost my voice. I swore never again. At home, Michael handed her a newspaper clipping about a young lawyer who won a case against powerful men. This is your mirror, he said. Sarah held it tightly, whispering, Soon it will be me. When Sarah gained admission into the university to study law, Michael beamed as though victory itself had entered the house. You are walking the path Francis dreamt for you, he said. The campus felt enormous, a sea of ambition. Sarah moved through it quietly, but with focus, never forgetting where she had come from. She attended lectures, read in libraries until closing, and copied case laws meticulously. While other students partied, she worked late into the night, eyes burning under the lamp. Sometimes loneliness pressed in, but she touched the hem of the folded dress she had kept and whispered, We keep going. Challenges came quickly. Professors were demanding, examinations brutal. There were moments Sarah doubted herself. What if I am not enough? She asked Michael during one visit home. He looked at her steadily. Then you will become enough. Struggle carves strength. Encouraged, Sarah pushed harder, submitting essays that drew commendation. By her third year, She had become known for her discipline. "That girl is relentless," students murmured. But she never bragged, she only worked. On graduation day, when she wore her gown, Michael whispered, "Your father smiles today." Sarah lifted her chin, replying quietly, "And tomorrow I will make the world listen." In university, Sarah met two classmates, Ruth and Daniel, who admired her determination. Ruth once asked, "Don't you tire of always being serious?" Sarah smiled faintly. "I can't afford to waste the years." Though she allowed them close, she never revealed her scars. Her trust had been broken too deeply. Michael reminded her one evening, "Your scars are not chains, they are keys. Don't let them lock you away." She pondered those words for days, learning slowly to let her friends support her when lectures weighed heavy. Still, betrayal's shadow followed her. At group study sessions, when others laughed freely, she sometimes flinched at tones that reminded her of Gloria and Melissa. Daniel once noticed and asked gently, "What are you afraid of?" She replied, "Laughter used to mean cruelty." He answered, "Then let us teach you another kind of laughter." Slowly, Sarah allowed herself to laugh without fear. Yet when nights grew quiet, she returned to her room, whispered to the folded dress beneath her bed, and promised, "I won't forget what was done. But I will not let it chain me either." Friendship softened her edges, but her core remained iron. Sarah's first experience in a courtroom came during an internship. The hall was vast, air thick with expectation, voices echoing like thunder. She sat behind senior lawyers, eyes wide, notebook open. The judge's gavel struck, and the room obeyed instantly. She leaned forward, watching the dance of arguments, how words could build walls or tear them down. "See," her mentor whispered, "it is not noise that wins, it is clarity." Sarah scribbled, heart pounding. When the defense faltered under precise questioning, she realized justice wasn't mythical. It was crafted, argued, proven. After the session, she walked with her mentor. "Did you see how the truth triumphed?" he asked. Sarah nodded fiercely. "I want to stand there one day." They chuckled. "With your determination, you will." That night, she wrote in her journal, "Justice is not a dream. It is a place, and I will stand in it." She studied harder than ever, memorizing procedures, examining case precedents until dawn. She began attending more trials, sitting silently, absorbing. Each time she whispered to herself, "One day I will speak here." The courtroom no longer seemed a distant mountain. It was a summit she had already started climbing. During her final years, Sarah began assisting in minor cases. Her first assignment was drafting documents for a property dispute. Nervous, she presented them to her supervising lawyer, who examined them and nodded. "Clean. Sharp. You have promise." Encouraged, she prepared more. Soon, she was allowed to cross-check witnesses. Her calm questions unsettled liars. "Answer simply," she would insist, her voice firm yet steady. Judges noticed. Peers whispered, "She has steel in her words." Each small victory stitched confidence where doubt once lived. One afternoon, after winning a petty theft case, Sarah returned home, excited. "I did it," she told Michael, her eyes bright. He clasped her hands. "I knew you would. These are your first steps into a larger fight." She smiled, but her thoughts drifted to the mansion. "One day," she murmured, "I will return, not as the girl they mocked, but as the woman they must respect." Michael nodded gravely. "When that day comes, the world will witness justice clothed in gold." Sarah whispered to herself later, not gold of vanity, but gold of truth. Her victories weren't loud, but they were seeds. And seeds, given time, become forests strong enough to shade generations. By graduation, Sarah's reputation had outgrown the campus. Newspapers wrote about her as the woman with the unbreakable voice. She walked the stage with honors, receiving awards for excellence in law. Cameras flashed, but she looked straight ahead, calm and composed. Michael, sitting in the front row, wiped tears discreetly. After the ceremony, he embraced her. Francis would be proud beyond words. Sarah whispered back, "Today I begin the real fight." As she entered professional practice, her name carried weight. Clients sought her not only for skill, but for integrity. In court, she spoke with a conviction that silenced even seasoned lawyers. "Justice is not delayed, it is defended," she declared in one trial, earning nods from the gallery. Reporters soon followed her cases, writing headlines about her victories. Yet at night, Sarah sat by her window, holding the torn dress still folded carefully. "I have not forgotten," she whispered. "I am ready." Each success was not for applause but preparation for a reckoning yet to come. She knew that somewhere Gladys, Gloria, and Melissa lived lavishly on what was stolen. The day would come when their names and hers would collide again, this time in the halls of justice. The mansion that once hummed with Francis's laughter now echoed with arrogance and indulgence. Gladys had transformed the house into a fortress of luxury, chandeliers imported, walls painted in colors Sarah had never touched, while Gloria and Melissa paraded in silks through the corridors. At dinner, their conversations circled around travels, jewelry, and parties, their lives dripping with excess. Servants were ordered about like pawns, and the estate Francis built through honesty was slowly carved and sold to sustain their vanity. Gloria once boasted at the table, "Mother, you should have seen how I humiliated that shopkeeper who dared question me." Gladys merely nodded with pride, her smile sharper than her fork. Melissa chimed in, "We have so much, Mother. Why not sell another plot of land? There's always more where that came from." Gladys agreed without hesitation, waving her jeweled fingers as if money flowed endlessly at her command. Yet underneath the glitter, cracks grew. Old neighbors whispered about their greed, noting how Francis's legacy had been twisted. None of them noticed or cared that their extravagance drew quiet attention from those who still remembered Francis as a man of integrity. They believed their deceit would last forever, blind to the shadows gathering around their wealth. In private, Gladys reminded her daughters to remain ruthless. "Power," she told them, "is not kept by kindness but by control. The moment you soften, vultures swoop in." Melissa laughed, tossing her hair. "Then let them swoop. We'll buy the sky itself." Gloria sneered, "We've done nothing wrong. The house, the land, it's all ours now." Sarah was weak. She couldn't keep it. None of them suspected that Sarah's silence had never been weakness but preparation. As they toasted wine in crystal goblets, they celebrated illusions. "To our empire," Gladys declared, raising her glass. The clink rang loud, but outside, winds carried whispers of suspicion, carried by those who had grown tired of watching deceit flourish unchecked. Their laughter filled the mansion halls, yet the legacy they corrupted stood restless, waiting for truth's return. In the bustling offices of the city registry, a man named Henry, once an accountant who had worked under Francis, studied records late into the evening. He had watched the estate's transformation with unease, noticing signatures that never matched Francis's careful hand, seals applied clumsily, and dates that contradicted themselves. Each page he turned deepened his suspicion until the weight of injustice pressed too heavily on his conscience. One evening, he confided in a colleague, "They've stolen everything. Francis never signed these documents. His estate has been looted in plain sight." His colleague warned, "Do not get involved, Henry. Those women are powerful, and they bribe easily." But Henry's resolve hardened. "Then I will not take their money. I will take this to the law." Carrying the files like evidence of betrayal, he approached investigators quietly, handing over copies. "Look carefully," he urged. "The truth hides in the details they ignored." The investigators began digging, discreetly at first, tracing bank transfers, interviewing staff, and uncovering payments made under false pretenses. One officer remarked, "These women are reckless, living beyond what was declared. There's rot here." Gladys soon received a discreet notice of summons, her eyes narrowing as she read. "Nonsense," she scoffed, tearing it in half. Gloria laughed, tossing the paper aside. "We'll buy them off, just like the others. Money silences everything." Melissa nodded confidently. "No one dares stand against us." Gladys leaned back, her smirk unwavering. "They've forgotten who we are. Let them try." Yet the summons did not vanish. It multiplied. Soon, journalists whispered of a brewing scandal. Documents once hidden began resurfacing. Henry, in his small apartment, listened to the news and whispered, "Francis, justice is coming." While Gladys dismissed the storm, truth was already marching steadily toward her doors, unwilling to turn back. Late one afternoon, in her law office filled with books and carefully stacked files, Sarah received a thick envelope from the investigative bureau. She unfolded the first sheet and froze. The names written in bold at the top, Gladys Okoro, Gloria Okoro, Melissa Okoro, stabbed through her composure. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through pages. Forged deeds, fraudulent signatures, testimonies of bribery. The very house she had been exiled from now stood at the center of a scandal, and fate had placed the prosecution in her hands. She sat motionless, the torn memory of her mother's dress flashing before her eyes, and her heart pounded with a rhythm that felt like destiny knocking. Closing her eyes, she whispered, "It has come full circle." That evening, Judge Michael found her at the desk, papers spread like wounds across the table. "What is it, child?" he asked softly. Sarah looked up, her voice low but firm. "It's them, the ones who stripped me of everything. Their crimes have returned to me as a case." Michael's face grew solemn, yet a flicker of pride lit his eyes. "Justice has its own clock, Sarah. It ticks slowly, but it never stops." Sarah's jaw tightened as she turned the pages. "I will not tremble. I will not run. I will face them." Michael placed a steadying hand on hers. "Do not face them as the wounded child who left that night. Face them as the woman you have become. This trial is not revenge, it is justice." Sarah nodded, though her chest ached with memory. "Then justice will wear my voice," she said. That night, she stood by her window, gazing at the moon. "Mother, father, tomorrow I will speak for you." Beneath the glow of night, she touched the folded remains of her torn dress. "They tore this once," she whispered, "but I will tear their lies apart." The weeks leading to trial became a crucible of discipline. Sarah locked herself in her office for hours, reviewing every forged document, cross-checking each suspicious date, and interviewing witnesses with relentless precision. "Your testimony will hold weight," she told a former staff member of the estate. "But you must speak truthfully, without fear." The woman trembled but nodded. "I saw Gladys make them sign papers under pressure," she confessed. Sarah documented every word, piecing together the story like a tailor repairing a garment long torn. In late evenings, when exhaustion dragged at her shoulders, she would glance at the dress folded neatly in her drawer and whisper, "Not yet. The day is coming." Michael often entered silently, observing her work. "Do you rest at all?" he asked once. She shook her head. "Rest can wait. Justice cannot." At night, the weight of memory pressed harder. She dreamed of the laughter that followed the tearing of her dress, of her father's final breath, of the humiliation that lived in her bones. But when she awoke, she steeled herself, whispering, "I am no longer that girl. I am their reckoning." In mock trials with her colleagues, she practiced arguments until her voice was sharp enough to slice lies. "Gladys will argue ownership through marriage," one colleague warned. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "And I will prove fraud through truth. Their arrogance blinded them. They left traces." Each piece of evidence she gathered became another thread in a golden robe she was weaving for the day of reckoning. One evening, she told Michael quietly, "I am not afraid anymore. I am ready." He smiled faintly, pride glistening. "Francis would call you unshakable." Sarah stood straighter, her heart resolute. "Then let them come. I will not falter." News of the trial spread like wildfire, carried from street corners to headlines. "Inheritance fraud of the Okoro estate," blared newspapers. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse days before the hearing, eager to witness scandal unravel. Television crews set up cameras, reporters rehearsing lines about wealth stolen and justice pursued. In markets and salons, whispers circled. "Is it true? The famous daughters who flaunt gold now facing prison? And the lawyer? Who is she? They say she is young but fierce." Sarah, watching the frenzy, tightened her jaw. Fame was never her goal, but she knew visibility could shield the truth. "The world is watching," she murmured to herself. "Let them see justice walk in daylight." Michael warned her gently, "The crowd will praise or mock. Do not bend to either. Speak only for the law." She nodded firmly. "I will." Inside her heart, anticipation churned with resolve. On the eve of the trial, Sarah stood by her mirror, rehearsing her opening words. She saw the reflection of the girl once mocked, and beside her, the woman forged through fire. "They tore my dignity once," she whispered, staring into her own eyes, "but tomorrow I will speak with the voice of law itself." Across the city, Gladys laughed as she tried on pearls. "They think they can shame me. I will silence them with money." Gloria scoffed, "Let them try to stand against us." Cameras love drama, and we thrive in it. Melissa clapped her hands, adding, "We'll turn the court into another stage." But while they toasted, the public's eyes sharpened, waiting to witness truth break through glitter. The world was not blinded anymore. It was ready to judge alongside the law. Morning arrived heavy with expectation. Streets near the courthouse clogged with onlookers, vendors selling water and snacks as though preparing for a festival. Then the sound came, a procession of sirens, flashing lights cutting through the crowd. Police cars led, followed by black SUVs carrying court officials, reporters trailing behind in eager vans. The final vehicle, gleaming in gold trim, rolled to a stop at the courthouse steps. Doors opened, cameras flashed, and Sarah stepped out. Draped in a golden gown tailored with quiet elegance, she embodied not vanity but triumph earned through fire. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Who is she?" one whispered. Another answered, awestruck, "The lawyer, Sarah." Microphones surged forward, voices overlapping. "Miss Sarah, how does it feel to face them today?" She paused, her voice calm yet firm. "It feels like justice is ready." Her words carried silencing chatter, turning every gaze toward her. Inside, even judges paused at her presence. The gown shimmered under the lights, not as ornament but as armor, a symbol that she had survived what was torn from her. She walked with poise, climbing the steps slowly, each stride echoing power. Behind her, cameras clicked endlessly, capturing the moment. Crowds erupted in cheers, some crying out, "Justice in gold!" Gladys, arriving later with her daughters, froze at the sight, their faces draining. Gloria muttered, "It can't be her." Melissa whispered, "She's the one?" Gladys forced a smirk. A dress won't win her case. Yet their confidence trembled, and for the first time, fear crept in. Inside the hall, Sarah stood before the bench, her golden gown catching light like truth itself. The convoy had not merely delivered her. It had announced that the girl they mocked had returned as the woman who would decide their fate. When Gladys, Gloria, and Melissa entered the courtroom, their bravado thinned. Gone were the confident strides. Instead, each step seemed burdened with invisible weights. The gallery erupted in murmurs. "Those are the accused. Look at them." Sarah stood at the plaintiff's table, calm, collected, her gown a silent declaration. Gladys sneered, though her eyes flickered. "So it is you," she hissed across the room. Sarah met her gaze steadily. "Yes, it is me, and today you will answer for your lies." Gloria gripped her chair, whispering, "Mother, we should have destroyed those papers." Melissa stammered, She looks untouchable." Gladys leaned in and muttered, "Hold your heads high. We will break her like we broke that dress." Their words carried desperation, not power. As proceedings began, the judge announced charges: fraud, forgery, and theft of estate property. The courtroom air tightened. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras rolling. Sarah rose, her voice steady. "Your Honor, today is not merely about documents. It is about truth stolen, dignity crushed, and justice denied. But justice delayed is not justice denied." The gallery erupted in applause before the judge silenced them. Gladys shifted uneasily, sweat breaking at her temples. Gloria whispered, "She's different. She's not the same girl." Sarah glanced at them briefly, not with bitterness but with authority. Inside their hearts, fear swelled, fear not of Sarah's vengeance, but of her unshakable calm, a mirror of their guilt reflected in gold. Sarah began presenting evidence methodically, her tone unwavering. "Exhibit A," she said, lifting the first document, a deed signed after Francis's death. His signature was forged. Observe the inconsistencies. She handed it to the judge, her confidence unshaken. Gladys tried to interject, "My husband authorized me," but Sarah cut in smoothly. "Authorization does not rise from the grave, madam." Murmurs rippled through the room. Gloria bit her lip, Melissa fidgeted, and Gladys's mask of composure cracked. Sarah continued, "Exhibit B, bank statements revealing transactions transferring estate funds into personal accounts belonging to the accused." Her voice grew sharper. "Exhibit C, testimonies of staff coerced into silence." The judge's pen scratched steadily, acknowledging every detail. Gladys attempted one last stand. "This is slander. My daughters and I cared for that estate." Sarah turned to her, her voice calm yet piercing. "You cared for yourselves, not the legacy Francis built. You turned integrity into profit, and mocked the daughter who should have been protected. Gloria whimpered, "Mother, please." The judge raised a hand. "Order." But the room already understood the tide was irreversible. Sarah's voice did not rise in anger. It wielded authority born from pain. By the time she concluded, the courtroom was silent, spellbound by her words. Michael, seated in the gallery, whispered to himself, "Francis, your child has become the voice of truth." The final day arrived heavy with anticipation. The judge, stern and deliberate, reviewed the mountain of evidence Sarah had presented. Gladys clutched Gloria's hand. Melissa leaned pale against her chair. On charges of fraud, forgery, and theft, the judge declared, this court finds the defendants guilty. The word thundered across the hall. Gasps rose, cameras clicked, and Gloria broke into sobs. Melissa buried her face in her hands, whispering, "It's over." Gladys attempted defiance. "This is injustice," she cried. But the judge silenced her. "No, madam. This is justice long overdue." He ordered restitution of the estate to Sarah as rightful heir and sentenced Gladys and her daughters to prison terms. The gallery erupted in applause, reporters rushing to capture reactions. Sarah stood still, golden gown shimmering, her eyes moist but firm. She whispered quietly, "Thank you, Father. Thank you, Mother." Gladys was led away, her curses drowned by cheers. Gloria wept openly. Melissa stumbled, both realizing that the empire they boasted of was ashes. Michael met Sarah's gaze, nodding proudly. "You did it, child. You carried truth to its throne." Sarah exhaled deeply, feeling years of humiliation fall away. The verdict was not just legal. It was a cleansing, a return of dignity to the daughter who had once been reduced to nothing. Outside the courthouse, the golden convoy waited, surrounded by a sea of cameras and cheering crowds. Reporters surged forward, their voices colliding. "Miss Sarah, is it true these are the very people who once mocked and stripped you of dignity?" Sarah paused on the courthouse steps, her golden gown catching the midday sun, and answered calmly, "They tore my dress then. Today, justice tears their lies." The crowd roared applause echoing like drums. She raised her head high, not in vanity, but in triumph earned through resilience. The convoy of police cars and SUVs symbolized not wealth but justice marching beside her. Michael joined her briefly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Francis would be proud beyond words. Sarah smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "He taught me dignity is the greatest dress. Today I wear it fully." Cameras flashed relentlessly, recording history. As she stepped into the golden car, the crowd chanted, "Justice! Justice!" Gladys and her daughters, led away in chains, could only watch as the girl they once mocked was now exalted. Sarah gazed through the window at the horizon, whispering, "Mother, Father, your name has been restored." The convoy rolled forward, sunlight bouncing off gold, leaving behind a memory engraved in every witness. A broken girl had returned not for revenge but for justice, and justice had come clothed in gold. Here's the Bible verse for the story. "He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun." Psalm 37 verse 6 NIV. This verse captures Sarah's story perfectly. Though she was mocked, stripped, and humiliated, God in his time lifted her up, and her dignity shone like gold before those who once scorned her. Moral of the story: cruelty may tear garments, but it cannot strip destiny. Patience, resilience, and truth always outlast deceit. Those who build their lives on greed and arrogance may glitter for a season, but justice, though delayed, will rise in its appointed time. True strength is not found in vengeance, but in standing firmly for what is right. Closing prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the story of resilience, dignity, and truth. Just as Sarah was mocked, stripped, and cast aside, yet rose again in your time, we are reminded that no humiliation can erase the destiny you have written. Lord, we ask that you clothe us daily with integrity and strength, so that when trials come, we may stand firm without bitterness, knowing that you are the judge who sees all. Father, grant us patience when the world mocks us, courage when injustice rises against us, and humility when victory is finally ours. May our triumphs never be born of revenge, but of righteousness that shines like the noonday sun. For every heart that has been broken, restore hope. For every voice that has been silenced, raise it to speak truth with boldness. Lord, let our lives, like Sarah's, declare that dignity is the greatest garment, and justice is your unfailing promise. We commit ourselves to walk in light, to forgive without forgetting, and to honor you in every season of life. In Jesus' mighty name we pray, amen. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.